town, nestled away from the hustle and bustle of city life, a chilling event unfolded, leaving a community shattered and a family destroyed. This is the story of Seth Privacky, a man whose actions would forever mark the pages of a small town's history book.
He killed 5 people, 4 of them family members, in Muskegon County in 1998.
A mother accused of killing 3 of her young children inside their room.
Anthony Todt is waking up behind bars this morning, where he'll remain for the rest of his life.
Questions continue to swirl around what led up to those tragic deaths. Casey Farmers is live in Romeoville with the latest.
Including 5 victims and the suspected gunman.
The Idaho mother convicted of killing her own children, tonight sentenced to life without the possibility of parole.
A familicide is a type of murder or murder-suicide in which an individual kills multiple close family members in quick succession, most often children, spouses, siblings, or parents. In more than half of the cases, the killer lastly kills themselves in a murder-suicide. If only the parents are killed, the case may also be referred to as a parricide. Where all members of a family are killed, the crime may be referred to as family annihilation. In cases like this, where someone with no apparent history of serious issues or criminal behavior commits such a horrific crime, it highlights the complexities of mental health, family dynamics, and the potential for hidden struggles that may not be immediately evident. Though there is not a great deal of research on familicides, what we do know suggests it is a highly gendered crime. Men tend to commit this act more often than women, but there have been women mass murderers who have wiped out their entire families as well. Family massacres, which constitute nearly half of all mass killings, almost all took place in a private residence. About 2/3 were motivated by some interpersonal conflict between the assailant and his or her victims. In most cases studied, the offender lived in the same household with all of the victims. Problems in the relationship, a breakup, and financial problems were often prevalent within the families involved. Like anybody else that commits some horrible, horrendous act, they usually do it based on emotion and immediate need or gain. After arrested, he or she confesses because they see the reality of what they're facing. In a vast majority of family annihilation cases, the suspect either commits suicide or confesses. Which brings us to today's case. It's about an 18-year-old named Seth Privacky. Seth falls in the case category of a family annihilator. He murdered 4 members of his family, as well as a 5th victim unrelated. At the time of the shooting, Privacky was a senior at Reese Puffer High School. His classmates described him as quiet and soft-spoken. He was a B-average student and seemed like your average teenager in the late 1990s. However, a family friend stated that Privacky's father believed his son was a psychopath who did not have a conscience or regard for life. His father might have known something sinister was brewing, but for the most part nobody seen the red flags. Although we do not know the exact movements of Seth Privacky throughout the day, the crime scene tells the facts. It's believed the killings began around 12:45 p.m., but they weren't discovered for nearly 12 hours. It was around midnight when the parents of April Boss went looking for their 19-year-old daughter. She had been invited to a Thanksgiving dinner with her boyfriend Jedediah Privacky's family at 1:30 that afternoon. But April never showed up to her 3rd shift job, and so her mother and stepfather went to the Privacky house looking for her. When they arrived, they saw a shadowy figure run from the garage area into the home and then spotted a man's body on the driveway, lying between 2 cars. As they moved toward the house, the couple saw blood in the garage and a young man run outside and into the wooded area. Alarmed, they used the house phone to call 911. When the police arrived, they found more bodies inside the home. 2 victims, April Boss and 78-year-old John Privacky, were found in a small back room off a garage. 19-year-old Jedediah was in the basement, and Jedediah's mother, 49-year-old Linda, was found in an upstairs bathroom. It didn't take long for investigators to figure out that the body in the driveway was that of 50-year-old Stephen Privacky, Seth's father. All 5 had been shot in the head execution style. As other officers arrived, a man emerged from the nearby wooded area and approached them. The man's name was Stephen Wallace, an 18-year-old acquainted with Seth Privacky. His very first words were that he had a story to tell the officers. He told police his good friend Seth Privacky had called him that afternoon to tell him he had killed his mother, father, grandfather, brother, and brother's girlfriend. Wallace said he went to the Privacky house and agreed to dispose of the murder weapon, Stephen Privacky's .22 caliber, which he tossed into a pond several miles away. He then told police he returned to the house later that night and was helping Privacky cover up the murder scene when April Boss's parents arrived. Wallace stated that him and Privacky fled into the woods when they seen April's parents pull into the driveway. According to Wallace, they were taking several items from inside the home when her parents arrived, including a television and other valuable household items. Wallace also stated that him and Privacky wrapped the bodies in sheets and planned to bury them later. He told officers that after disposing the weapon, he returned to film at Blockbuster, went home, and attended a church youth group. After returning to the home later that evening, both men realized the bodies were too heavy and would be hard to dispose of, so they decided to arrange the bodies so that it would look like a robbery gone bad. But unbeknown to both men, their plan was about to be foiled and the truth exposed. Stephen Wallace's shocking revelations triggered a manhunt for Seth Privacky. Reese Puffer, the high school where Stephen Privacky had been a teacher and where Seth was a student, went on lockdown with fear that he might show up to cause harm to others. Nobody knew what state of mind Seth was in, and the clock was ticking. The day was rainy with thunderstorms, and the community was on edge as news spread of the family massacre. Photos of Seth were passed among students who might not have already known the high school senior by face. Students were told to stay on guard and keep an eye out for anything suspicious. Privacky had been on the run for nearly 13 hours since the bodies were discovered. As news began to spread of the deaths of Jedediah and April, both of whom had graduated the previous year from Reese Puffer High, some students began mourning and were stricken with grief. 18-year-old Genevieve Simonelli was so disturbed by the tragic news, she left school before lunch. As she was driving around trying to collect her thoughts, she seen a hitchhiker on the side of the road soaking wet and stopped to give him a ride. When the man got into the passenger seat, she was shocked to discover that it was, of all people, Seth Privacky. Privacky asked to be dropped off at the home of one of his friends nearby, and of course she agreed. She kept her cool and acted as if she had no idea who he was. Once she dropped him off, she then quickly drove to a payphone and called 911 to report the discovery. Within 10 minutes, police emerged on the location where Seth was dropped off at. They discovered nobody was home at the residence as they gained entry. Upon searching the property of the location, officers found Privacky hidden inside of a pole barn out back, soaking wet and shivering. During an interview with Muskegon County Detective Dennis Edwards, Privacky first claimed his brother Jedediah had committed the murders, but soon he gave a full confession. Edwards later would describe Privacky's demeanor as flat and empty, daydreaming and staring off into space. Privacky recounted the events that unfolded the afternoon of the massacre. The details that Seth provided to detectives were disturbing to say the least. Seth stated that while the family was preparing for a belated Thanksgiving dinner, he gained access to his father's .22 Ruger handgun and loaded it to full capacity. His father had left to pick up his grandfather for dinner. His mother was in the shower in the upstairs bathroom, and his brother was downstairs watching television. Seth stated that he first went downstairs and shot his brother Jed at a point-blank range. His father and grandfather arrived shortly after. When they came in the door, he shot both of them. Seth said he shot his grandfather twice, just to make sure he was dead. Seth then went upstairs and shot his mother as she was getting out of the shower. All victims were shot at point-blank range without a word being spoken. Shortly after killing his mother, Seth stated that April Boss, Jed's girlfriend, walked into the house unexpectedly. "She seen the body of my grandfather, so I had to kill her," stated Privacky. He also shot April at point-blank range, no words spoken. After giving details of his disturbing acts, Seth then told detectives that he waited for about a half hour, then decided to call his friend, Stephen Wallace. The details that Stephen had given officers earlier on added up with Privacky's confession. Privacky told detectives that he gave Stephen the .22 Ruger to dispose of. When Stephen left, he started cleaning up the scene. He spent 2 hours doing this, mopping up blood and cleaning the bathroom. That's when he came up with the botched robbery murder plan, which in the end failed miserably. With the confession of Privacky, detectives were able to lay out the timeline of events that took place. Privacky was booked into the Muskegon County Jail with a $5 million bail and charged with 5 counts of open murder. Wallace was held for the same amount bond and on identical charges. Wallace's charges were later downgraded to 5 felony firearm charges and 5 counts of being an accessory to the crime. Although he participated in the cleanup and disposal of the weapon, he claimed that he was in fear of his life, and he thought Seth was going to kill him also. Wallace was acquitted by a jury and all charges dismissed. A detective of the Muskegon County Sheriff's Department called the verdict a travesty. In 2021, Stephen Wallace's life came to an end. Reports show that he died from a drug overdose. He was 40 years of age. After months of court proceedings, Seth pled no contest and was convicted of 5 counts of first-degree murder and 5 counts of felony firearm charges. He was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. During court, the prosecutor described the crime scene as one of the most brutal he had ever seen. Privacky cried after he finished giving a statement to the court, but the remorse didn't feel genuine according to witnesses. He requested that he'd be able to see the free world one more time before being shipped off to prison, which was quickly rejected by the judge. These outrageous requests would come back to light just over 10 years later. Seth had wanted to see the world one last time so desperately that he attempted to escape from prison on July 15, 2010. According to reports, Privacky and 2 other inmates carjacked a correctional staff semi-truck near the prison during recreation time. Seth attempted to drive it through the double fence, resulting in a large hole in it. All 3 prisoners were level 2 security, the minimum allowed for prisoners serving life. The truck traveled about 100 yards before it came to a halt. All 3 inmates attempted to flee the truck as correctional officers ran towards them with weapons drawn. Privacky ignored all orders to stop running and was shot dead. He took a bullet directly to the head, just as all 5 of his victims had roughly 10 years earlier. After he was shot, the other 2 inmates surrendered. Surprisingly, nobody else was hurt during the brazen escape attempt. Although Seth confessed to the killings of his family, he never really went in depth of why. His excuse was that he was mad at his father. We will never know what drove this 18-year-old to commit such a horrendous act, and like most other mass murder cases, more questions than answers came out of the investigation. This was a real crime investigative report on the case of Seth Privacky, a teenage family annihilator.